Hello and welcome to the Writer Report. This is Eric Writer, and this week we're going to be looking at the 1989 movie titled When Harry Met Sally. This movie was directed by Rob Reiner, and it was written by the late Nora Ephron, and it stars Billy Crystal, Meg Ryan. It also has Princess Leia herself, Carrie Fisher, in the movie, and the late Bruno Kirby. The duration of the movie is 96 minutes long, and the genre of the movie, it's a romantic comedy. And this movie actually went on to be nominated for 5 Golden Globes, including Best Script from Nora Ephron, Best Direction from Rob Reiner, and Best Performances in a Leading Role for Best Actor Billy Crystal, Best Actress Meg Ryan, and was also nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Picture. Nora Ephron also had an Oscar nominee for her Best Script. The genre of the movie is, well, obviously it's a romantic comedy, and the duration of the movie is 96 minutes long. Alright, and here's the plot of the story. The plot starts out in the year 1977 when Harry Burns, played by Billy Crystal, and Sally Albright, played by Meg Ryan, have graduated from the University of Chicago as they travel to New York City to start their lives and their careers. During the trip, they have contrary beliefs on the subject regarding the relationships between men and women. Harry doesn't think that men and women could just be friends because sex is always in the way. Sally begs to differ, and they soon part ways on bad terms. Next, we cut to 5 years later as Harry and Sally once again coincidentally run into each other, and now they are currently in relationships and also have jobs. Sally is a journalist for New York Magazine, and while Harry is now a political consultant, Sally's in a relationship with someone named Joe, played by Stephen Ford, who happens to be the son of former U.S. President Gerald Ford. And Harry is in a relationship with someone named Helen, who we never see in the movie, but she is greatly mentioned. Harry decides to sort of reconsider the whole men and women just be friends relationships. But because of his suggestive ways, once again, Harry and Sally part ways once again in unfriendly terms. 5 years later, in 1987, Harry and Sally once again unite, this time at a New York bookstore, and both of them are in a crossroads in their relationships. Sally had broke up with Joe, and Harry has also broke up with Helen. So now they're both in non-relationship commitments at the time being, and they decide to just be friends, you know, gal pal, guy pal. So after leaving that cafe, they decide to start seeing each other more often. They go to museums, they go out to dinner, they take walks in the parks, or take walks in the park and whatnot, and just sort of, you know, progressively enjoy each other's company as a good way to ease the pain that has been affecting both Harry and Sally. As they grow in terms of relationships, their perspectives start to get altered progressively. At a New Year's Eve party, Harry and Sally are now attracted to each other, and they eventually hook up a relationship between their best friends, Marie, played by Carrie Fisher, and Jess. And eventually they naturally become clinged to one another, and they rapidly become more and more attracted to each other, to the point where they eventually get engaged and they eventually get married. One night on the phone, Sally announces to Harry that her ex-lover, Joe, has been engaged and is getting married to one of his legal assistants. Of course, this really saddens Sally, so Harry eventually rushes over to her apartment to console with her, which eventually leads to them getting engaged in sex, as sort of, I guess, a way to soothe the pain. And eventually one awkward moment led to another between Harry and Sally, and then an argument breaks out at Jess and Marie's wedding reception, and so then they stop seeing each other. At a New Year's Eve party, Sally is kind of like alone without Harry. Meanwhile, Harry is just decided to, crash into his apartment, sit down with a box of cookies, and decide to just watch Dick Clark's New Year's Eve special and watch the ball drop from his home. But just before New Year's Eve, just before ringing in the new year, Harry rushes over to the New Year's Eve party and spots Sally just as she was ready to leave the party, and he tells her that he is head over heels over her, and that he loves her, and that he just can't live without her. So finally they kiss and they become lovers. And then in a documentary, they tell stories about each other of how they met, and they are now married, and everything just turns out peaches and cream, so to speak. Alright, here's my personal opinion. First of all, I thought the acting was beyond excellent. And I think this is actually one of the best performances from Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan. And I'm not just saying that because, I know Meg Ryan has been in many other romantic comedies in the past, like Sleepless in Seattle and You've Got Mail, amongst others. Billy Crystal, who is truly one of the great comedic legends, also turns in a stunning comedic performance, and the humor is definitely low-key and very, very informative. I mean, this is intellectual comedy, not, relying on stuff like toilet humor or gross out stuff. We don't need to. This is a comedy that does not depend on, using raunchy jokes, at least not to overextent, or has to rely on unintelligible sexual innuendos. Nothing like that at all. And I think that Crystal and Ryan's performance complements very nicely to Ephron's script. By the way, Nora Ephron's script was actually the inspiration of when she first met director Rob Reiner. And this is kind of almost like a subliminal anecdote regarding Ephron's relationship with Rob Reiner and how they started out. Billy Crystal turns in a great performance. However, though, I did kind of find him one-dimensional, and throughout the movie he doesn't really change very much of his perspectives. He still kind of remains cynical, high-strung, opinionated individual. Whereas Meg Ryan's character, Sally Albright, changes for her perspectives of life differently, even if it is, taking it the hard way. I mean, when you first see Sally Albright, she comes across as being vulnerable and thinks that love comes naturally. But then, of course, as time went on, she eventually had to learn the hard way that love does not necessarily come naturally, and that you sort of have to trust your gut in order to get a better understanding of love. And of course, she had to learn it the hard way. Billy Crystal's character, Harry, he also had to learn things the hard way, of lessons of life. And also has learned that, yes, men and women can be friends without having to engage in any kind of intercourse. I feel that the progression of the love between Harry and Sally is natural flowing. How they start off by not liking each other, and it also goes to show you that love at first sight does not always begin that way. And that I like the approach that, it took them years to get a better understanding of one another. And that worked out just naturally. It's just fine. And the flow was great. The pacing was excellent. And I was glad that, 96 minutes long was just satisfying enough for this movie. It wasn't over long, I'd rather not like to sit through a 2-hour and 30-minute long romantic comedy. 96 minutes long is the respectable time that any kind of romantic comedy, or a comedy for that matter. I also like to give a big shout out to Nora Ephron for creating a brilliant script, and many of the scenes work out nice, and they all serve a purpose. Of course, everybody will know that famous scene where it took place at Cat's Deli and Sally performed a fake orgasm. Even that scene served a purpose. It may have looked a little cheesy and over the top, but it also worked out quite splendidly. Rob Reiner, hey, what can I say? The guy has Hollywood in his veins, coming from a Hollywood family. Father, of course, legendary Carl Reiner. Rob Reiner, of course, himself started, in the 70s as Michael Stivic, aka the Meathead on All in the Family. And then he went on to direct some of the best films, especially in the 80s and 90s. I'm talking films like This Is Spinal Tap, The Princess Bride, Stand By Me, Misery, and When Harry Met Sally. But as the years go by, his films have kind of plummeted. This is a time where we get to actually see Rob Reiner at the peak of his directing career, and he was just absolutely amazing. Also, the music by Mark Shaman and Harry Connick Jr. fit each scene quite well. And it was also quite nostalgic, taking us back to the 80s, as a lot of 80s themes come to mind here. So anyways, if I was to rate When Harry Met Sally, I would give this a 9 out of 10, and I highly recommend everybody to see it. And thank you for listening. Hope to hear from you guys soon. Please write back to me. I would really appreciate it. Be constructive in what you have to say. And I think we will end this review right now. So on behalf of everybody in YouTube, take care of yourselves and each other. Have a good day.